Hello guys, and welcome to another video. After a long hiatus, a long time, we are back, and today I'm going to be discussing The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. Please do not mind how old my copy looks. They say old is gold. I got it off a second-hand trading platform here in Shanghai that I joined sometime last year. So today I'm going to be discussing The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. And the first time I read this book, I must have been about 13 or 14 years of age. And I did not quite think much of the book. I did enjoy some moments, some striking events that happened in the book. But overall, I did not think it to be really as much of a masterpiece as contemporary literature makes it out to be. But then, after all these years, it's been about a decade, I reread this novel a couple of months ago, and I realized that the reason why I did not think in the first place that it was a classic might have been because I was just too young and immature to fully grasp the context and the beauty and the brilliance of the book. So today I want to discuss some points that I missed upon first reading of The Adventures of Tom Sawyer that I have managed to grab now that I'm older, and why I now am convinced beyond any reasonable doubt that this book is a classic. So let's get into it. Highly and strongly recommend everything you want. Tell that I genuinely highly and the first point has to be Aunt Polly. Tom is an orphan, and so he grows up under the care and the protection of his aunt, Polly, who lives with his half-brother, whose name is Sid, and they all grow together in the same household in the town of St. Petersburg, which is in Missouri, right? And beside the Mississippi River. So when I read the book the first time, I totally and purely harbored a strong disdain for Aunt Polly. I thought she was cruel, and I thought she was like a tiger mom, always hovering around Tom like a wild hawk, looking for him to make the least mistake so she can whoop him and punish him. And I really disliked the old lady. But now that I read again, I realized that Aunt Polly was actually right. Like in typical teenage boy fashion, Tom was repeatedly getting into trouble. Tom was naughty, he's a menace, and he's always up to no good. The book opens with Aunt Polly yelling for Tom, like, "Tom, where are you?" She keeps yelling and looking for Tom all over the house. And eventually when she finds Tom, I remember her proceeding to grab Tom and to punish Tom, to try and whip Tom, right? And when I first read it, I disliked her so much. I was like, why are you whooping him? Completely ignoring the fact that Tom was actually stealing jam. He had been stealing jam, hiding in the closet and eating it. And Aunt Polly had repeatedly warned him. In the book it clearly states, how many times have I told you not to steal this jam? About 40 times. Not to steal this jam. And at this point in time, Aunt Polly she is kind of forced to punish him. From an adult perspective, I can see how at such a perilous point in time, this auntie will feel that it is her responsibility to impose some kind of structure and discipline into the life of this young man who badly needs it because the society is perilous and dangerous. So, from a more mature perspective, when I was a kid, I took the side of Tom. Now that I'm old enough, I take the side of Aunt Polly. Maybe I'm growing up after all. The next point that I missed upon first reading, that I caught on second reading, was just race in Tom Sawyer. I can write a whole article about this, but I'll just give you the highlights. This novel takes place in the 1880s in the South, what was known as the Southern states. So at that point in time, slavery was very prominent. I don't know how I missed it the first time, but in this book, Aunt Polly actually owns a slave. The slave boy is called Jim, And chapter 2 opens with Aunt Tom facing punishment. And he looks up this fence that he has been forced to whitewash by Aunt Polly as a form of punishment. And I keep saying Sid. And Jim comes along carrying a bucket. And he's obviously going to fetch water. And Tom, who had been, lamenting about the punishment he was just about to face, sees an opportunity to deceive the boy to switch duties or to switch roles with him. The boy knows that he's likely to suffer and endure punishment in the event that he allows himself to be carried away by Tom's, distractions. And so he knows he has to put his mind to his task and to finish it. But as they're deliberating, Aunt Polly descends upon them with a whip, and she whips Jim. But the book says nothing about her whooping Tom. So I think it is a small demonstration, even at the family level, of what was going on at the time. The white boy seduces the black boy into crime, but the black boy ends up getting all the punishment and nothing is done to the white boy. So even at that family level, like, Mark Twain was just demonstrating the injustice that was going on at the time on a larger scale. And also there is the use of the N-word. Not just the N-word, but the N-word with the R, which from what I have heard is even more, it holds more weight than just the usual N-word that we hear in music and in entertainment. So there's all of that. And how racism is handled in this book, I completely missed it. I don't know what I thought a colored boy was when I first read this book, because it clearly states in one of the chapters that this character was a colored. I did not know. I was 13. I probably just glossed over it and forgot about it. But now that I read again, I see the differences in the race of the characters. But I must point that in this book, there is no overt racism. There is no race, like in the process of his writing, Mark Twain does not portray any group of people in any particular derogatory way. The racism in this book is seen in the way that characters interact with each other. For example, Tom and his best friend, Huckleberry, are discussing superstitions surrounding a dead cat. And Tom says the best use for a dead cat is to cure warts. And Huck says that. And Tom is like, wait, what is that? Is that what you use your dead cats for? So he proceeds to say that he has heard that the best way to cure warts is using spunk water. And when he's pressed upon the source of his information, and Huck is like, bro, state the study in which this scientific or this medical achievement was found. And so he said he heard it from someone who heard it from someone who told someone who told someone who told someone who told an N-word, and the N-word told him Tom Sawyer. So there is that. But again, there's a use of the N-word, which is a typical characteristic that we all know to be part of that specific time in the United States. And there's nothing really derogatory that I find in the use of it. It's just saying this is how it was. I would find it way more disingenuous if Mark Twain just said, there was no racism at the time, people did not use these words, and characters, there was sort of like social, political, and economic equity between people of all races in America in the 1880s. I think it's more respectful or respectable that he said it the way it was. So it's a portrayal of the time. I do not see any racism in this book that goes beyond the racism we all know to be characteristic of that particular time or that particular point in time in the United States. When it comes to Native Americans, however, again, there is no direct racism, but I would say there is more of in character interaction, there is more racism directed towards Native Americans, because I guess you would say the antagonist in this book is called Injun Joe. He commits a murder in the book, and while he's being judged, someone does make a comment that it is all that Indian blood in him that causes him to be a bad person. So because he's half Indian, so one of his parents is white, the others the other is an Indian. And so he says it's all that Indian blood in this man that is causing him to behave this poorly. So again, I consider that to be racism because, again, they attribute his bad character not to his personal decision making, but to his race, his ancestry. So that, I think, is racist. But again, it was a feature of life at that time, and I think it's accurately reflected. There is no hurt here. I've heard proposals for the book to be banned. I have heard some say that the book is racist because of the N-word, and I think that is just, don't do that. It's unnecessary. Okay, and then the third thing that surprised me was superstitions. I thought superstitions were an African thing. Growing up, all we heard were superstitions. There were superstitions surrounding every activity of life, everything you do or say. In fact, if a cat were to come around your house and cry all night and meow in a sad tone all night, it was considered that you were about to lose someone of value to you. Someone was going to die. If you were walking along the path and you tripped, you had to check which foot you tripped on. If it was your right foot that tripped, then you're lucky. Something good is about to happen. But if it was your left foot, something bad was about to happen to you. We also had superstitions surrounding normal things, like if you're eating and you chew and you bite your tongue, it was considered that someone was calling your name at that particular point in time while you were eating, and they were thinking about you in a fun and a loving and a longing manner. But if your eyes started to twitch, someone was talking about you and they were gossiping about you, they were saying something bad. So there were superstitions surrounding almost everything. And when I read Tom Sawyer the second time, I am genuinely surprised at just the amount of superstition that I see when I read it. And the superstitions in Tom Sawyer are even wilder and more odd than the superstitions I grew up believing. In fact, when I read the superstitions in Tom Sawyer, I feel like we were more reasonable in our superstition than the Americans were in the 1880s. And these were apparently a very prominent feature of American life at that time, because Mark Twain says that in the introduction, which he wrote in 1863, I believe, 1863, 1864, in the preface, he says that the superstitions in this book are very accurate, and they are an accurate reflection of the superstitions that were widely disseminated among slaves and young people in America at that point in time. It may be, theoretically, I think, there's a reason why he says slaves and young people. It may be that my ancestors, or not my ancestors, the Africans carried these superstitions across, and since kids are generally more susceptible, they believed in these things more. But again, they were wild superstitions. Huck Finn, in one of the chapters, I think it's Tom Meets Becky, chapter 6, I believe, goes through an elaborate superstition that must be performed with specific rules. He's almost like those native doctors in Nigerian movies, giving Tom an elaborate superstition that must be performed at a particular time, following specific procedures for warts to be cured. I find it very, 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 very interesting. The fourth thing I did not pick up upon first reading Tom Sawyer is the beauty of the writing. Mark Twain is a genius. The way he writes, he has this ability to pick a small detail in the scene and then zoom in on that detail, making it more and more significant as the story goes on. And then there's also the fact that he rotates, you're constantly meeting new characters from the beginning of the book till the end, from meeting Tom and Spoley and Sid to Huckleberry to, the other, Jim, the other pirate that Tom goes with, to meeting Injun Joe and meeting Muff Potter and the Welshman at the end. There's a constant flow of new and interesting characters from beginning to end. And the style of narration, especially in this version, which is one of the reasons I bought it again, is ultimately supreme. I totally love it. The monologue he writes when Injun Joe is found dead at the mouth of the cave. Beautiful. This last point is kind of linked to the one about superstitions, because I found that the Americans in those days, in the 1880s, were very, very much a religious society. Like, Americans were very religious. Aunt Polly reminds me in several instances in the book of my African aunties, bringing religion into everything. The belief of spare the rod and spoil the child. It is not meant to be interpreted literally. But for some reason, people who view religion the way that Aunt Polly does and the way that African parents do, which is a similarity I never thought I'd find anywhere, is so similar. This lady beats Tom and whoops him, even though it breaks her heart, because she believes in the idea of do not spare the rod and spoil the child. This is something that African parents, I cannot tell you how many times I have been whooped on that pretext. Again, and that comes from religious beliefs and just the general use of religion, the Sunday school that Tom has to attend, the reciting of scriptures, the bringing religion into every single discussion that Aunt Polly does in this book is typically characteristic of Africans in general, present day Africans. And I always find it interesting when we find this psychological and ideological connection between two groups that look on first glance like they should have totally nothing to do with each other. I saw a comment that was very interesting to me, and someone said that the Filipinos are just Asian Mexicans, which means that there's a lot of cultural, ideological, and to an extent maybe religious similarities between Mexicans and the Filipinos, the Philippine people. And I know they share some common history with Spanish colonization, but these are two races or two groups of people you would not expect to find any common any commonalities. To find that, just as I found commonalities between the American society in the 1880s and the present African society that I grew up in, was very, very fascinating to me. So for this reason and many others, I have changed my mind about The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. I now strongly believe that it is a classic, and I wholeheartedly recommend it to anybody who has not read it. Please, if you have read it, leave down in the comment section some thoughts. What do you think of the book? Do you think it is a classic? Why do you think it's a classic? What are the aspects of the book in terms of the theme, the style, the characters that you liked the most? And I will make sure I read it. Thank you guys for watching. See you on the next video.